The toughest part for me in my journey was to really spend time looking at myself in the mirror. And the hardest part was saying I love you to myself. The first 4 times I did it, I cried my eyes out. I couldn't even get, like, I would just say I couldn't even go after that.
Hi there, this is Sarah Kuhn. If you are an INFJ or in a relationship with an INFJ or related to an INFJ in any way, and you want to figure out how they operate, what makes them tick, and how to communicate with them better, this is the show for you. It's called The Quiet Ones. This is a show that deconstructs INFJs, what they are, how they think, how they feel, how they operate, and how they relate to people with other personality types. Whether you have just found out that you're an INFJ or have known for a number of years, there is something for everyone. You will learn more about your personality type so that you understand who you are and understand how you operate in the workplace, in relationships, in your family, and with friends. I want you to walk away from every episode feeling like you have a place of belonging, feeling like you are no longer alone, feeling like you have a place to be heard and seen and understood as you really are. This is a place to connect with other INFJs, to learn and grow and really thrive. I want to give you inspiration and real life strategies that are going to help you figure out how to live your best life every single day. Though INFJs are very rare, you are not alone in this world. You are not the only one who thinks the way that you do and feels the way that you do. Hear from real INFJs just like you. Hey there, I'm Sarah Kuhn. Welcome to another episode of The Quiet Ones. I hope that you're having a wonderful day today. I know it's Monday, and I know I say this every single Monday. It feels like the worst day of the week for me. So I'm glad that you're here. I have an amazing episode for you. Today we're talking to a self-love coach named Keidi Janz, who has some amazing information to share with us, and I can't wait for you guys to hear the interview. Before we get to that, I have just a couple of things to share with you. I wanted to make sure that you know about a membership platform that I have called the INFJ Community. It's a platform that's a lot like Facebook, actually. It looks very similar, but it's a lot better. You don't have to deal with the algorithms or the ads, and everything that you see on the community is from INFJs. We have wonderful, deep conversations about all kinds of different things. I hope that you will come over and check it out. There's a link for it in the show notes. You can also find it at infjcommunity.com. We're also going to start doing some live versions of the podcast, but they're exclusive to the community. They're once a week on Sunday evenings, and there's an opportunity for you to participate as well. We have several different guests who are going to be joining me, and we'll have time to take questions, and it's just going to be an absolutely amazing time. Like I said, they're on Sunday evenings when we're doing the live videos, and you can only see them if you're a part of the community. So make sure that you go over there and check it out. Also, I have been working on my first book for several months now. It's called the INFJ User Guide. I'm so excited for you guys to read it. It's been a process writing a book. I didn't think I would ever be this close to being done. Actually, I thought that I was done, and I sent it to the editor, who is a wonderful and dear friend of mine, and also an INFJ too. And she sent it back to me, and she's like, "Do you have time for a phone call?" And I was like, "Oh no, I did something wrong." So we get on the phone, and she's like, "Yeah, you need to start over, basically." She's like, "Your whole book is in the first 3 chapters of what you sent me." And I'm like, "Oh, no, I don't want to start over." And she said, "You can't write everything that you know into one book." And I was like, "Oh, yeah, that makes sense." I guess that's kind of what I did. Because I wanted it to be a user guide. I wanted you to know everything about the INFJ personality. Whether you were first starting out or know a little bit about it or have known about it for a long time. And so I thought, okay, let me just put every single piece of information that I've ever learned into this one book. And it didn't turn out very well. And looking back on it, I'm like, yeah, that's probably not the best direction to go. So we put together a game plan for me to basically throw everything out and start from scratch, which is what I did. And you guys, I'm so glad that I did it. I am so incredibly proud of the book, of what it's become, what it is. I can't wait for you guys to read it. It's completely amazing, honestly. It's going to be out in less than a month now. I can't believe it's getting so close. It's going to be out April 6th, and I've put it on pre-order it's been on pre-order for a little while now. But I've added some amazing bonuses. So if you've already purchased my book, you're going to be included in the bonuses. If you haven't purchased it yet, please check it out. Make sure that you do so. The link is in the show notes. And I wanted to tell you a little bit about the bonuses. There are 3 masterclasses that I'm going to be offering. So one on how to find your purpose, one on how to start a podcast, and the last one is on how to turn your blog into a profitable business. So make sure that you get in on those. They start not this coming weekend, but the next weekend. And then all of the masterclasses are going to be offered in the INFJ community. So if you do pre-order my book, then you get a free 3-month trial to the community. So make sure that you get in on that. There's also a free ebook that I'm going to be sending you very, very soon. That's called What to Do When You're INFJ. And it's all kinds of different scenarios that is great information for you when you get into some sticky situations. And it's also great to be able to give to your friend or your spouse or anybody that you'd like to share more information about your personality with. So that's going to be coming to you very soon. And yeah, I hope that you go over and check out the book. Make sure that you pre-order it, honestly. I really think it's something that every INFJ needs to read. And it's really a great resource, like I said, whether you just found out that you're an INFJ or you've known about it for a little while and have a little bit of information but are looking for more, or whether you've known that you've been INFJ for a long time. And like I said, the master classes are getting started in just a couple of weeks. So make sure that you go ahead and purchase the book now. The link is in the show notes. You can also find it at infjwoman.com. All right, so let's get to our guest. You guys, I'm so excited for you to hear this interview. I spoke to a lady named Keidi Janz, who is a self-love coach. I had no idea what a self-love coach was when I reached out to her, but I'm so excited that I got to talk to her. It's completely amazing that somebody coaches people like me and you on how to have more self-love in their lives. I had so many questions for her, and we actually talked for over 2 hours, and I still have a ton of questions that I could ask her even after that. So hopefully she's going to be a guest on one of our INFJ community live podcast episodes. So we'll see. But Keidi is a self-love coach. Like I said, she works with clients one-on-one who find themselves stuck or looking for a change to create their vision and start living the life they deserve. She's been quoted in articles in Global News, Business Insider, Brit CO, and various other publications. And just as a reminder, you can watch the full video interview on YouTube at youtube.com/thequietonspodcast. And there are also several other videos that come out at youtube.com/INFJwoman and on our Instagram page, which is at @thequietonspodcast. So you're an INFJ, right?
Yes.
How did you find out that you're INFJ?
I can remember back in middle school, maybe like grade 8 or something. Remember doing the Myers-Briggs test, and I have since then always just got an INFJ. I think at one point I got the last letter that changed. That it was like perhaps it's between the two. Maybe That was the most recent one. Probably because I'm really working on not judging others and not judging myself. So that J piece at the end. But yeah, I think since like grade 8, and I really felt understood when I read like the description. I was like, yes, this is so me. Yeah, that's how I found out.
Was there anything about it that you really felt changed your life or changed your outlook on different things?
I really think just like having it as a tool of like deeper understanding on how I made decisions really helped me. And I think just like with everything else, like knowing that that's part of like my personality, but choosing in different situations that I could still lean to be a little bit more of an extrovert or an ambivert in the times that like I really need to step forward and make connections. But I think the biggest like understanding for me in the introvert part is of understanding that the way that I recharge is being by myself. So it's less about like the output. It's like once, I do all the things and I come home, I really just need to be by myself, like take a nap, read a book, do something to kind of let everything settle. And then so yeah, I think that was pretty life changing in understanding that.
It's like permission.
Yeah, exactly. That's a great word. Yeah. And it's just like having, the more you know about yourself or the more you know about a situation, I always feel like better prepares you to understand and to see like the areas where it really works for you and areas where it doesn't.
Yes.
Yeah.
Awesome. I have to tell you, I'm so excited to talk to you. When I saw that you're a self-love coach, I don't know what that is, so you're gonna have to explain it to me. But I'm so excited because for the longest time, I honestly thought that I was born without self-love, without self-confidence. I was just like, I never had it. It was something that I've always struggled with. And I've sat through so many conversations with my parents, with teachers, even with bosses at times, which gets kind of awkward,
Yeah.
where they're like, um, your problem is that you don't have any confidence. And I'm like,
Mhm.
yes, I know that's the problem. How do I fix it? And they're like,
I love that you're so excited. You're like, yes, I do have this. Yes.
like, yes, I've heard it before. I've heard it multiple times, lots of times. And my next question is always, how do I fix it? And they're like, I have no idea. I've never had that problem before.
They're like, this is where it stops for me.
Right. So it's like, okay, admitting that you have a problem is the first step, but then what's the next step? And that's been the biggest struggle for me. It's only really been in the last couple of years now that I've realized that it's not that some people are born without it. It's just that it's a challenge for some people. It doesn't come as naturally to some people like myself as it does to others.
Yeah. I really don't think that it's something that like we're all born with. Like when we're little babies, we love ourselves, when we like I have a little friend who has a baby, and when he sees himself in the mirror, it's like he is amazed with himself. Like you can tell that like kid is like in love with himself. And I
Right.
think that's also like what we all experience. And then as we start to grow up, we start getting to hear feedback on like, you're being a bad child. And then as a little kid, we're interpreting that I'm bad, or I'm not worthy of this. And then we continue into our teenage years, which is probably the biggest place where we get hurt in how we feel. And then we start to learn what's acceptable in society and what's not, what opinions are accepted, what nationalities, like all those other factors that we get judged on and that we judge others on as well. The things that we see in media, I mean, that's like that deserves its own episode all on its own. And when all those things come into play, suddenly we're like, oh, so if we loved ourselves and we are here, now we're slowly going, -1, -1, another negative, somebody else said something negative. And when we're not putting any work in like something positive to bring our self-esteem back up, or how we feel about ourselves, or we're not spending time taking care of ourselves, giving ourselves the respect, or voicing our opinions, right, which is another way of telling yourself that what you're saying is worthy. If we're not adding anything, we're then just constantly in a deficit. And it becomes hard work to do, because no one, until they bring it up to you and they're like, you're not being confident, you're like, well, like, where did I learn to do that? Like, I didn't take a class for this. Nobody takes a class for this. Was there supposed to be a time like when you're like, okay, for your 13th birthday, we're going to have a confidence class, or we're going to have a class on self-love.
Yep.
And right from that, we jump into, well, how do we love other people then, right? Like it's never this whole period, I mean, as soon as you're a teenager, you're like, okay, you start having crushes, maybe you have your first boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever. It goes directly into other people. There isn't this part where it's like, well, I need to love myself first, because really, well, how do I know to do that with anyone else?
Yeah. And I think for INFJs, it's even harder because our feelings, we have extroverted feelings. So we're always worried about everybody else and we don't spend a lot of time being worried about ourselves. And when you get to when you don't find out that you're INFJ until you're older and you don't start understanding that things, like I've only known that for a couple of years and have really been studying it and really understanding what all of it means. So for me, I just thought it was normal and that everybody was so focused on everybody else.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
it's like, oh, wait a minute, here I'm, 32, 33, just figuring out that that's not how everybody feels. That's just just a few of us that are pretty rare who feel that way.
And it's also, if we were to have more of these conversations, like with our friends or just anyone really, then we would start to notice that, oh wait, like not everyone else thinks about it this way. But because we all really stay focused in our own thoughts and our own beliefs, and keep conversations at a really surface level, then we really never truly get to know other people, and in turn, like, be able to help each other through this journey and be able to handle some of those like more complicated things where you're like, I can't really Google this answer because I keep just getting like really fluffy things, and none of the like emojis and the gifs are helping me in this situation.
Right. Or, when you do reach out to your friends and family and they're like, I have no idea, I don't have that problem. And they're like, and then it becomes more of an attack on you,
Yeah.
even if they don't mean it to be, because they're like, what's wrong with you that you don't have that? And you're like,
Yeah.
oh, so it is just me? Like there's something wrong with me? I'm completely broken? I thought it was just a little bit, but now it's like totally.
Thank you so much for your help again.
Right? Yeah. So where do I even start looking? I mean, that's my biggest question, honestly, because a lot of people ask me that too. And I'm like, it's just been a process for me and I'm really starting the process out. So where do you tell people, where do you start looking when they have that problem?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's never really like a right or wrong time to start, because whatever it was that not trigger, maybe that's the wrong term, but that really clicked for you, that you're like, wait a second, like it's true. Everyone else tells me I don't seem confident, or they don't see me as someone who's confident, or I can tell that I don't really have a lot of love for myself, or I can be my own worst critic. I think that is one of the biggest flags, where we flat out say I'm myself's worst critic. Then that's really like a confirmation, I think, or a bland like explanation that there is no love there. Because if I'm my worst biggest critic, that means there's no way for the love to come through anywhere, because the critic is the only one that's going off. And
Right.
so I don't think there's ever any wrong time. I think whenever it happens is the right time for you, because we have to also be in the place to be able to accept that now is the time for me to look at them, or to look at this. Now I have a little bit more maturity. Now I see how it's affecting my life. Now I've chosen to live my life differently. A lot of times when I work with my clients, they come to me when a change has happened in their life. So they either have just gotten out of a relationship, or they're in a job they really hate, really in that word, or something has happened in their life where they're like, I really don't like the way that I'm looking at myself through this, or I really see that I'm the one that's getting in my own way. I'm the one that's not really letting myself propel forward. And when you're at that place, it really just, the first step I always say is just the awareness of it on its own. The awareness within you, because it doesn't matter how many times people have said that to you. When it's not the right time for you to handle it, it's not the right time. And so when you finally see that in yourself, the awareness of it is that first step, just like we said before, like when you know the problem. Okay, so now it's the first step. And really, it's more of the awareness. I don't think it's a problem in that sense. And the way that I like to work, and one of my main beliefs is none of us are broken. There isn't any fixing that needs to happen. We just need to take care of ourselves. It's all about, how can I make myself feel better? How can I make myself really live the life that I want to live and be the true version of me, versus like, what can I add on to like fit the pieces of the puzzle who can I attach into my life to love them so they make me feel whole, or what job? Because the moment we start to look externally at anything that's besides ourselves to fill up that place, it becomes, that's even more dangerous, because what happens when that thing falls out of your life, when that partner leaves, or that job changes, or any part that we've identified as part of our identity about who we are and if we're worthy of love or not. And so when we only turn towards our inwards, not towards, inwards within ourselves, then we start to experience some of the things of, where did we learn that it wasn't okay to love myself? When did I learn that, I don't love myself when I look at myself in the mirror? Where did I learn that? Why am I saying that to myself? And a lot of times, when do we start adapting that inner dialogue that maybe a parent said to us, some little kid in third grade that was bullying us, and now that's the internal dialogue? Because what happens is, when we hear it, then we start absorbing it as our own. And there isn't then any time when that language is like, no, wait a second, without the awareness of, wait a second, that was something that, the bully in school said to me. It was never my own words, but somehow now I've carried it for years as my own words. And the next step after that awareness for me is just that curiosity. It's a curiosity of willing to meet yourself with some compassion, to just really look at things for how you're living in them, how you're living, how the words that you're saying to yourselves, how do you look at yourself? How do you interact with others? How do you act when someone talks about you? How does that make you feel? Do you want to hide? Do you not want anyone to know your opinion? We talked just a little bit about that people pleasing aspect of like really jumping in for other people. Is that because I don't think my opinion is worthy enough, so I'm trying to help someone else with their situation here? So the curiosity is really where it starts, of the same way as when you start to date someone new, you're just so curious about them. You're like, well, what's your favorite color? Like, what do you like? What's your favorite food? Like, how do you feel about this? Do you like the color green? Do you like this? That starting to get to know ourselves in that, I think, is a really easy way for us to identify, oh yeah, I've never done that with myself, because we immediately jump into doing it for other people.
Right. So I want to go back and unpack what you said just a little bit. It is such a dangerous game to place your self-esteem and your self-worth outside of yourself, because I've done it so many times.
Me too.
I had this job that was like my dream job that I worked 10 years to get. I gave up everything for, and it was good for about 5 minutes. And then I realized that my boss was narcissistic, and I wanted a different job, but in the same industry. And so then I worked about 4 years, and then I got laid off. And I was like, I don't know what to do now. Because not only did I lose my job, but I lost everything, my apartment, my car, my independence, just like everything. But more important than all of that for me was like my identity. I didn't even know who I was, because I was so wrapped up in that job, and the feelings that I got from like almost feeling better than everybody else, because it was like on the inside I just felt so bad about myself. But when I had this job that was a pretty prestigious job, and it was something that was really hard to get, so for me it was like, okay, this is where my sense of importance and self-worth comes from. It's all wrapped up in this. And then when it was gone, it's like, what do I do now? I don't even know who I am.
Really?
I don't even know where to start now, because it's all gone.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, because I think particularly for a lot of women, when I talk about things external to us, it seems to be tied to some sort of partner, right? And like that breakup that happens. But even the identity that's so attached to the job and to how we're perceived, our reputation, our status quo, right? Like where we rank in the hierarchy of just our society in general, is that ego attaching itself to the identity. It's the mind that's telling you you're better than everyone else, so you don't actually have to deal with feelings. Other people can deal with feelings. You're way more advanced than that, right? Like all that stuff. The same way as when you meet someone new. I mean, what do you say? Hi, I'm Keidi, and I am and I do this, right? It's all about the things that then people can start putting together who you are. So when you strip away, like when you no longer can call yourself, like what your job is, if you're married, if you, what kind of status you have, if you have the latest fashions, like if you have the Instagram following, any of that stuff. When you peel all of that, who are you? And that's, you know, a really big, deep question to dive into, but it's an important one. It's an important one for you to dive in within yourself to see who what your values are and what core beliefs and things that you care about, because that's part of who makes you who you are. It's not the car, it's not the travel, luxury, it's none of the other external stuff.
Yeah. It's scary too when you think of, or at least I do, think of myself as an, you know, an INFJ. That's a big identity for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I like to think of myself as like, you know, somebody who thinks about things deeply, somebody who cares about other people, and somebody who has like this higher purpose. I want to do something really special with my life. But then when I start thinking about who I am as a person, I think about my brand new iPhone and the nice car that I have and the fact that I drink Starbucks in the morning. And it's like, when you start taking away all of those things, it's like, oh, well, wow, maybe I am a lot more superficial than what I thought I was.
Well, I think honestly, like it's the shift in the mindset and how we think about that. It's when we strip down all these external things that we value so much, and we strive and like overextend ourselves and hustle our way up to get like that shiny object syndrome, that when we get this thing, then I will be a complete person. Then everyone will know that I'm worthy of love, I am worthy of existing, and all of that stuff. But when we strip all of that away and we come back to what we care about, which is making an impact in the world, being a service to others, any of these things, it brings it back to that we're actually all a lot more similar than we are different, which is the biggest trip for your mind, because your mind wants to think that it's so special, that you're the only person that can do this. And that's why you must rank higher than everyone else. Because that's all it gets you. I mean, it gets you the external stuff. It doesn't get you any more peace. It doesn't bring you any more happiness. It brings you money and fame and all that stuff brings you freedom, sure, for the time being. But then you can only live that for so long. And then you're like back to square one of like, how do I actually feel within me?
Yeah. Yeah, I had to grab a piece of paper because I'm making notes.
Okay, good.
You said so many things that I'm like, hold on.
Which is why like podcasts are my favorite thing to do, because I, especially doing it with video, which I don't typically do, so this is fun, but it just feels more like a natural conversation, and like things just flow out, so it makes it easier.
Yes. So what I was thinking about while you were talking is high expectations. I have been accused so many times of having high expectations. And I know that it's true that I do have really high expectations, but I don't know exactly how that plays into self-love and deserving. And I don't know, you were talking about relationships as well, and that's where a lot of my high expectations come in too. And I think that's where I've gotten messed up a little bit in my thinking, because I start talking about, you know, the kind of life partner that I want, the kind of guy that I want to meet, and I have a list. And every time I talk to somebody about it, they're like, that's a really long list. And the first thing that I hear in my head is, you don't deserve that. So how does that play into it? Those high expectations and those feelings of deservings, especially when you're talking about, you know, like the status symbol that we're talking about. And maybe that's part of how it plays into it as well. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing that came to mind as you were saying that is asking on why all those things are on the list. Does that person exist? Do you think that person exists?
I think so,
Okay.
because I've spent a lot of time, I guess, reevaluating some things, because one of the big things that I've been working on recently is my dreams. I've had a lot of big dreams and goals in my life for the longest time, and it's like I've always wanted those things because I've always wanted those things. And I think maybe that's why I still want them. So I'm like, okay,
Mm.
let me think about this for real. Like, do I really still want it, or do I want it because I always thought that I wanted it?
Yeah,
And
that's a great point. And like in the phases that we go through of life, our needs and wants change. Like the same version of you that maybe like even a few years ago would have wanted a specific version of a car for a status symbol, maybe now just wants the car that's comfortable enough to get you around. Or maybe you still want the luxurious car. It doesn't matter. It's just like our needs change as we get to know ourselves more and as we become more comfortable with like our wants and needs, which I think again, like we said, with being an INFJ, you're so focused on other people that when you actually spend the time, you're like, oh, but I actually, prefer this instead. But I always tend to get this when I'm around other people. It's because I'm trying to please them, or that false sense of trying to please anyone, really.
right, right.
Yeah.
I've
Um,
spent a lot of time evaluating the list, because I spend a lot of time thinking about it, because I'm going to be 35 this year, and it feels like there's this ticking time bomb, you know how that goes. Um, but then also because so many people have called it into question, and I've also discovered that I don't have to accept what other people say, which is the most amazing thing in the whole entire world. So now
Absolutely.
it's like I've discovered this whole deserving thing that's like, maybe I do deserve better. Maybe I do deserve something. So let me reevaluate what's on the list and see, is this person really real? And I really think so. I hope so. I've never met somebody
Yeah.
like that, but I don't think that it's like out of the realm of possibility, I guess I would.
Yeah, yeah. And the reason that I asked the question that way, and I hope it felt okay for you to answer,
Yeah.
um, is when we start listing specifically what we want, right? It can kind of work both ways. We can really attract it and ask the universe for help to bring it in for us and really put that vibe out there. But sometimes we can also really use it as a crutch of unless they check every single thing in this box, there's no way that they're going to get a chance. And I don't know about you, but there's been so many wonderful people in my life that were not wonderful in the beginning, or I didn't see all of those qualities in them until they shared their pain with me, or until they shared, really the essence of who they truly were. So I would, if I was in your place, I would look through that list again and see, are they more external things? Are those the kinds of things that you're going to get to know about someone by really being with them for a while? Because if let's just say, what's something that you wouldn't know, like that they're a compassionate, kind person, I feel like that would be on most people's lists. That you wouldn't really get to see how compassionate and loving they really are towards you or towards other people unless you were spending a little bit more time with them. And the same thing of, do I really believe that this person exists is because have I made such a magical person out there so then I can in a really unconscious, subconscious way maybe self-sabotage myself, because I'm going to tell myself like unless they meet all these things, I'm never going to be deserving of having that kind of love because this person doesn't exist. And a lot of times our ego makes up that story in our head as a way to protect us, right? Because we've been hurt before, our heart has hurt before, we haven't treated our own selves well before. So there's all these pockets of like, let's put together these stories, and our ego and our mind really loves stories. It really loves making a story out of anything. And so that it can pull onto that next time you meet someone, you're like, oh, this really reminds me of this so and so instance on this other time. So I'm just gonna, take them out of the picture completely. And I know, like, like I said before, been there. We've all like, whether it was, with a partner, or whether it was with a job or a friend, these things show up constantly for us because we get caught in our own patterns.
Yes. It Yes, for sure. That I've definitely done that. There's a lot of self-sabotaging for sure. And now that you say that about jobs as well, that brings up something else that I really want to ask you about. I have had way too many jobs, first of all. But that also means that I've gone on a lot of interviews and
Mm.
applied for a lot of jobs. And I've heard this from other people too. It's almost like when I'm looking for a new job, I'm scared to apply for a job unless I'm 100% qualified for it. And
Mm,
even then, it's like, I don't know. And then when I get called in for an interview, my first thought is, okay, how is this job going to work? Like, what's it going to entail as far as the commute? This is going to work out and
mhm.
everything, I'm going to get this job. And then I go in for the interview and I'm like, I can't even answer their questions because I can't sell myself because I don't have enough confidence in my abilities to be able to say, yes, I can do this. It's such a problem as far as job interviews go. It's
Yeah.
terrible.
And I think you touched on it, like right even in that first step. I have to I will look at the stats after this and send them to you because I think it'll be important for you to share with your listeners as well. I want to say like 30% of women will apply for a job that they're probably about 80% qualified for, because they'll look at like two things on the listing that they don't have the skills for and like exit out of it completely, compared to men, which will apply like if they have 80%, if they match 60% of it, 60% of it, they will apply for the job. And not only will they apply, they believe that they're confident enough that they're going to get the job. So I feel like we're already at a disadvantage society wise in how we were raised and how we were brought up. Particularly like even for myself, it was like you stay humble, you don't gloat and show off all the things that you know, and that what you're able to help them with or tell people what they should do. Because how often have you been in an interview and you're like, I can really help you solve that problem? Like you're just looking at it the wrong way, and me with my skills, I can help you with that.
Yeah.
And I think in the ways that there's so many aspects that come to play when we're out there to sell ourselves, whether it's in a job interview or whether you've launched your side gig or your business, to show up fully with all the things. Because not only are you dragging around this baggage of I'm new, I'm out of a job, or I'm inexperienced right now, which are already feelings that don't make us feel good because now we're trying to prove that, and we're trying to make a living, all of those things in once. But then we're also dragging along the things of I don't feel good how I look right now. Or if you could only like really know that I've been studying for this long, I have this much experience, but I don't really know how to like portray that as an introvert or as an INFJ in particular. Like all of those things come to play. And so I think it really makes me keep making sure how important it is that we really understand that the building block for anything is how we treat ourselves and what our love for ourselves looks like. Because with that being the foundation, we can add on all the other things. And I really truly believe all the ways that we treat other people and the ways that we show up in our lives, and a lot of times how close we can get to those dreams has to start with that foundation. Because if we're not taking the time to fill up our own cup, to talk nicely to ourselves, to really be grateful for the things that we know and that we've learned and how we look and that the way that our bodies works and all of these things, we're never going to be able to show them to anyone else. And we're never going to be able to be there for someone else in the same way.
I was just in a conversation this afternoon with a guy who was trying to convince me that he knew more than I did about marketing because he was a guy. And
Yeah,
I was like, you don't do marketing, you do sales, which is different. It's not the same thing.
yeah, yeah.
And my job description, my title is marketing manager, but he wouldn't listen to what I had to say, and he wouldn't defer to my advice and opinion. So I was just like, fine, you just do whatever you want to do. And then he was like, but I want your opinion. And I'm like, no, you clearly don't, because I've
Yeah.
tried to give you my opinion 3 times. So when this conversation is done, you need to walk away because I'm done.
There are so many things on a societal level that we really need to work on. I mean, I think this is the truth for a lot of women can experience this, being in a higher position, being a CEO of a company and having someone else tell you what you should be doing in your company and all of that stuff. And I think it becomes even more annoying really when you're like, oh, I already have to deal with this inner critic in my own head. Now I've got this annoying guy here also saying the same things, and
Yeah.
it just adds fuel to the fire for sure.
It was amazing to me though, because a couple 3 to 5 years ago, what he was saying to me, it would have really affected me. It would have
Mm,
really like made me question everything about myself. And today I was just sitting there listening to what he was saying and going, you know, you're totally wrong. Like trying to keep the look off of my face, like,
yeah,
but
yeah.
I was able to listen to what he said and not accept it, because it's like, that's not the truth. I know what the truth is, and you don't know what you're talking about. That's the
And
truth.
that's your problem because you don't want to learn either, right?
Right?
I
Right?
think that's a beautiful moment, like what you just shared, because especially tracking back to something that would have upset you before or you would have carried into your day, like those are the little moments of when it really shows that you've put in the work. Because a lot of times when you're doing this kind of work, it really feels like you're like, okay, well, I don't have something tangible. Like I didn't get like an award at the end of this. I didn't get like new credentials to add to my name, right?
Right?
Like I don't need to go to school for self-love because there's nothing I'm going to add after that. Who am I
Right?
going to, I can't put this on LinkedIn. I can't add it to my signature, any of that. But in those moments when you start to track back and you're like, this would have really upset me, and now look, I still have the rest of my day to enjoy it and to experience it as is without being affected and attaching something. Like it's such a powerful thing.
Yeah, it really is. And it's kind of one of those things that it almost sneaks up on you, honestly. You don't really notice it. It's like a little bit, and then all of a sudden it just, you know, it's, I don't know if that makes sense.
Yes, and all of a sudden you're like closer to being the truest version of you.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
it's so important to recognize and be grateful for yourself and the work that you've put in those moments, because again, like as soon as you have a little bit of pathway, your ego is ready to make up a new story about something else that you need to fix about yourself, right? It's
right.
like, okay, whatever, we've moved past this. But it's important to recognize that moment of celebration, because it is a way of being grateful for yourself, giving love back to yourself, and just recognizing that I did this. It's the hard, as I like to call it, the hard shit that I put in that got me here.
Yes, for sure. So I want to go back a little bit. We talked a little bit about being seen,
Mm,
and that is one of the biggest things that I have struggled with and still struggle with. And I talk to a lot of people, a lot of INFJs who want to start a blog, or they want to start a podcast or a YouTube channel or whatever it is. And even if it's just a regular job, you know, like we talked about going to an interview, any type of putting yourself out there, being seen is such a difficult thing. Especially, you know, we deal with perfectionism. A
mhm.
lot of us women deal with feeling like we're not enough just because of the way that we look. You know, because some of us are overweight, like me.
Me too.
Some of us have brown hair, and we're like, man, I wish I could have blonde hair. I spent so much money dyeing my hair blonde for like 3 years, and and I was thinking about it just recently because I got my tax return back, and I'm like, oh, I could go dye my hair again, but then I'm like, do I want to? But it's just, it all really goes back to being seen. We're afraid to put ourselves out there. How do you get past that? How do you, or power through it? What's the process? What does that look like?
Yeah, I'm going to bring it right back to that awareness again. Once we identified that, okay, like I noticed that I feel super conscious. I'm so focused on like how I look, right? And like how I'm presenting myself in front of this in the situation. It's important to notice like the thoughts that come up. And that's what I really mean by the awareness. When you look at yourself in the mirror, are you nitpicking at the things that you don't like about your face, your body? Are you noticing the new wrinkles, the gray hair, that extra like side muffin, or what was it? I forgot the name.
Like,
I'm just gonna call it fat, okay? The fat on the side, like all of that. And are you looking at those things? And not only are you looking at those things, there's nothing wrong with looking at those things. It's what are you saying after that? Are you saying you're fat, you're ugly, you're not deserving? Look at you again, haven't worked on yourself, must mean you don't care about yourself. Like that negative, that bully talk, really. Like some people really identify that as like the mean girl in school. That's the voice now. Or for some people, really, it can be like your parents really said that to you as a kid, and now you've adopted that as language. like media in general, right? Like all of these things. So paying attention, and it can really be helpful to really personify that inner critic as someone that you don't like, right? So sometimes you can give it a name of somebody that you really don't like, and then you can be like, oh, there's so and so again. Like, that's not me. That's someone that's like, that's somebody else that's saying these things, right? That inner critic, because it's never giving us information in order to help us. It's really like, here's a database of things that I've collected over the years that someone else has said to you, or maybe you've even set yourself in a really low point, but now we've adapted that as that's the dialogue, versus the difference of listening to your inner guidance, your inner wisdom, or your intuition. It's always like, I think we could be a little gentler with ourselves. I think we can, and it just comes in such a different tone of voice. But when we don't take a step back and pay attention to those thoughts, we think we're the inner critic. And we think that's all there is, right? Like, this is the only way. And I think it's so easy to see in each other as well. Like, when you've just been so hard on yourself, like, you go to a friend, you can just see, like, you can see that they're having all these thoughts. You can physically feel like how like wrapped up they are in it. You can really see that they're going through something. And it's the same for us. And so that would be my first thing, is to notice those thoughts. And especially important to notice them right before an interview, right before whatever step that you're taking, because that's when it's going to be its loudest. That's when it's going to have the most things to say. And with the awareness of that, I think takes it back to that first question we were talking about. Well, who am I then, right? If I'm not this inner critic, and if I'm not this like inner voice that's giving me the guidance, then I must be the observer. There's a whole other third person in this dialogue. So then when we're noticing the dialogue, we can pick and choose who we want to listen to. We can pick and choose to listen to, okay, maybe I can be a little bit more compassionate with myself today. And that's how that voice gets a little bit louder, and it starts at least becoming in balance with the ego of itself.
That's interesting. I've never thought about that. There is definitely a fight in my head all the time.
Okay, good. Because I had this conversation with a friend, and she said she read something that there's people out there who don't have an inner dialogue. And I'm like, so, okay, I think this is going to be fake news, so I'm going to stop spreading it, because I think most of us have an inner dialogue.
Yes. I've just never thought of myself as the observer. I mean, I've thought of both sides, and it's like, okay, I'm either on the good side or the bad side today. I'm either picking the good thing or the bad thing, and there's never like a neutral thing, because with me, everything is black and white. It's all or nothing. It's, you know, if I'm going to do something, it's going to be perfect, or I'm not doing it at all. And there's been so many things like that I've had to put down, because it's like, I'm not perfect at it, so I'm not going to do it. I tried to be a runner for like 2 years, and I was like obsessive about it, like running 2 or 3 hours a day,
Wow.
6 days a week. And I'm like, you know what? I still stink. It's been 2 years and I'm not very good. I'm getting a little bit faster, but I was supposed to lose a ton of weight and I didn't. And I was like, oh, this is terrible. I'm not going to do it. But there have been so many things. And like my blog too, I've started 6 or 8, probably 10 blogs. And I never stuck with it because I thought, well, I'm not very good at it. And I don't know what it was that caused me to stick with this one that I started last year, but I'm really glad.
I'm glad, because we're talking now.
Yeah.
But I want to talk about that a little bit, because this idea of like not doing something because you're not perfect at it, or not knowing that you're going to succeed in a way, right? Is really this like big crutch in a way of letting yourself try anything and fail. Because what's the worst that's going to happen if you started running and it didn't work? You actually didn't enjoy it. Maybe you weren't like, maybe it wasn't like happening for you because you didn't really want to do it. It was just something that you took on because you thought about it, right? It's the same thing with like, if you've got a blog, you have all these posts, but you haven't shared it with anyone, because what if it fails? And one more on that, what if it succeeds? What if it succeeds and I'm not the perfect person, it's not the perfect blog, then what?
It's almost as scary what if it succeeds as what if it fails.
Scarier,
Yeah.
right?
Because it's like when you first start out writing, you sit down to write and you're like, what if nobody ever reads this? You know, and you're like, I'm going to put all this work into this and then nobody's going to see it ever. But then you start writing stuff and it's like, for me, it was really hard because I like to pour my heart and soul into what I write about. I want to write about something important that matters.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's like, what if somebody does read it? what if,
What if it changes someone's life?
or what if they read it and they judge me? What if I'm the only one? What if they're like, just like what we were talking about before, like, oh, you're the only one who does that. Why would you say that?
Yeah, it really it's the fear is that we can be imperfect humans, launch imperfect things, and still be hella successful. Like that is the ultimate fear. Why? Why? Because we already know and understand there is no perfection. Like the level of perfection that we're striving for ourselves, for our work, is just unachievable. It's just unachievable because it doesn't, there is no point in perfection. Like that's actually not where we learn. We learn with our flaws. We learn with the, like, think about some of the quirks that the people that you love the most have. That kind of makes them them. That kind of gives you reasons to love them.
Right.
So it's the same. It's like it feels so difficult to like turn that mirror on ourselves and like, can I still love myself while I don't feel I'm at my optimal best, while I suck at running, while I'm overweight, any of those things? Is it still acceptable for me to love myself if I'm not perfect?
I think one of the things that I really struggle with, especially when it comes to some of those things that you mentioned, is like, if I love myself the way that I am, I'm not going to change.
Is
Like
that true though?
I have this terrible thing, and maybe it's one of those fears that I need to work through. I will not buy clothes that fit me because it's like, I'm not buying that size. It's way too big. It's gross. And it's just about me. Like, my best friend could be sitting across the table from me. She could be bigger than I am, and I would never say anything like that to her. And if she said it, I would be like, what is wrong with you? Why are you saying that? Like, no, that is not okay. You need to buy clothes that fit you. But for me, it's like, if I buy clothes that are my size, I'm never going to be a smaller size. But then I literally have 10 different sizes of clothes, and I won't throw the smaller ones away because it's like, no, if I throw them away, I'll never be that size again. It's one of those things that's just like this terrible cycle. There's quite a few of those cycles in my life, and that's like one of the biggest ones that's like, nope, I'm not going to do it. I can't. That's the thing. That's the one thing. It's not what I eat. It's not that I drink Starbucks every morning. It's not that I won't get out of bed and go exercise. That's not what's keeping me from losing weight. It's the fact that, I have clothes. Or that
I have clothes,
right
and that I'm actually comfortable in them. But I really want you, I think specifically with what we're taught about health in regards to size and in regards to weight and what that means about whether we're healthy or not, and whether we are deserving or not, and what, because you use the word gross as well, what are some of those mean words that we use around that. Diet culture is a real damn thing, and it is not you, particularly with weight. It's not just you and your thoughts. It's that we're being fed these messages constantly, right? Like even the whole thing right now with Weight Watchers becoming a wellness brand or whatever, like that is still a cover of diet culture. It has nothing to do with your willpower. It has nothing to do with these things. Like that constant cycle has actually never been proven. The cycle of these diets, no diet has actually ever been successful, like without somebody going back to a different size once they incorporated whatever they took off from whatever diet, right? And
Right.
so I think particularly in that case, it's really important to notice all the other messages that you're receiving. And going back to that fear of being seen, I think something that we really have a lot of power in today's world with social media is how we curate our own feeds and what feeds we choose to see, who we choose to like learn from. Are we following accounts that are really calling out fat phobia, diets, not diet culture, all of the crap that everything is under a wellness brand now or whatever situation, are we being informed? Because we're constantly being fed these. And I think in traditional media before, and like magazines and TV and radios and all of this, there was no way for us to filter and unfollow things that we didn't choose to see because they were constantly just blaring in our face. However, really, this is something that I always stress with my clients, is part of our work together is you really taking a step back and noticing how you feel with the accounts that you follow, the movies that you watch. Is there diversity and inclusion in any of the things that you're choosing to see? Really being cautious, because we do get impacted by them. We get impacted by news, we get impacted by, all the photoshopping and the Facetune or whatever all those apps are in social media. And it's being aware of those. Every time I see someone like this, how does it make me feel about myself? And I always say, it doesn't matter if it's of your family member, doesn't matter who it is. There's a beautiful mute button. If it's causing you to be at war with yourself, it's not worth it.
Yes.
There's a big difference of being at war with yourself and wanting to improve yourself. Those are two different things. The toughest part for me in my journey was to really spend time looking at myself in the mirror. And the hardest part was saying I love you to myself. The first 4 times I did it, I cried my eyes out. I couldn't even get, like, I would just say I couldn't even go after that. And so I think that sheer act of really standing there and looking at yourself, and how often do we say I love you to everyone else? Like, you hang up your call with your best friend, you say love you, talk to you later, and like to really, like we said, like sit there and be like, I've lived all my life and have not taken a second to look this woman in her eye, me, and say that I love you. Like, so
it was about 6 years ago that I sat in a counselor's office for the first time, and I'm like, this is my problem. And she goes, well, you need to start doing, what you're talking about. She's like, you need to start speaking kindly to yourself. And I'm like, but I don't believe it. It's just like, it's this constant argument. And I couldn't stand in the mirror and say that. It took me years to be able to say that. And even now, every once in a while, I'll look in the mirror and think, oh, I look kind of nice today. And it's like, that's weird.
No, say it proper. You're gonna say I'm beautiful today. I think that's where you were going. I don't think you were saying kinda.
It's like, it's this really weird feeling. And even now that, it's getting a lot better and I'm a lot farther along on the journey than what I was just, 6 years ago, it still feels weird. It doesn't feel normal. Okay, so tell me about a little bit about your coaching business and how it works.
Yeah. So right now I work with clients one-on-one. Like I mentioned, most clients come to me when there is a big life change. Something has really stung, and they're really being faced with how they're holding themselves back, and just maybe how they're not even having a relationship with themselves. I work with a lot. My work really is inclusive in terms of being body positive. And so I do work with a lot of clients who are also, which is pretty much all women, regardless of shape and size. We all sort of tend to fall into that category. So we work together, and really what I like to say is that I just help guide them in their road to self-discovery. I'm not the one that's doing the work. So a lot of times it's not a fun thing to jump into, because it requires an investment of time, and even more than that, an investment of effort. Because there isn't ever a time where it's going to be the perfect moment for us to work on ourselves. There isn't going to be this magic chunk of time that's going to show up and say that for the next 3 months, you're really going to dedicate this time to yourself and getting to you to feeling better with yourself. So it makes it harder, because the choice is ours and we have to be the ones to initiate it. And so we really work together through some of these things that we discussed here, figuring out what are the core values, what are some of our limiting beliefs, what is the story that we're telling about ourselves. If I was to tell you, come on up and tell me a story about you, how quickly would it be, again, to go back into those external moments? No, but how about you? How do you feel inside, right? And that story is the one that we repeat to ourselves over and over again. I think we have something like 40,000 thoughts And 98% of them are the same as they've been before. Like they're just a repeat of the day before, and before, which is why there's never a time that's like, oh, now I should work on my self-love, because it's been the same. There's nothing out of the ordinary for you to be like, oh, wait, one moment, now I should talk about this. So we really work through those things together. A lot of my clients have already started to tap into this journey. They're a little bit aware about some of these things. It takes a certain level of awareness before you're like, okay, I've done so much work on myself, or I've already taken some of these steps, but I really feel stuck and I don't know where to go next. And I think that's really when it becomes beneficial to work with a coach that feels good with you and resonates with you, that can get you to those next steps. Because again, the self-talk is always the same. And so you're going to be in that cycle. You're never going to catch yourself because this is your cycle. And there's nothing out of the ordinary. So when you say something out loud to me, I'm like, oh, did you notice, by the way, like that's the word that you use when you were describing yourself. And for the first time, they'll always look at me and be like, what? Like, exactly. These are the words. This is our inner dialogue. And when we say it out loud, it loses a lot of its validation. But otherwise, if no one is probing you with these questions, it's not really coming out of you in any way. And so by the time we work together for 3 to 6 months, depending on what we're working on. And by the time that we're done, a lot of times there's this big shift that starts to happen in their lives, where they're no longer willing to accept like a shitty job, or they're no longer willing to put up with that friend that they know has been toxic for years. And we just get better at setting some boundaries, things, because the way that we treat ourselves changes. Everyone else around us starts to look at us differently. And now we're expecting more from them too. Because if I only treat myself with love, you ain't coming around if you're not going to treat me like that either. And when I set that expectation and that's my baseline, honestly, it really starts to drop some people really quickly, and it really starts to shift. But what it really does is really empower you to go after all those dreams that you've had that keep staying in the back burner because you're just not ready for it yet, right? Like we talked about that launch, and that like, I'm just going to go for it, whether it's going to be received well or not, whether it's going to change someone else's life or not. It doesn't matter. This feels like part of my journey, and I'm going to do this.
Tell us where we can find you, your website and your social media.
Yeah, so my website is KeidiJanz.com, and on Instagram it's at Keidi, but it's spelled KEI.DI. And I hope that you'll connect with me there, because Instagram stories is where I live. More than posts, it's just stories. So you can expect stories of my dogs and my food, but then also lots of self-love tips in there too.
Awesome. All right, I hope you guys enjoyed that interview as much as I did. Keidi is such an amazing person to talk to. She is so sweet, and I really enjoyed our conversation. Here's some takeaways from the interview. Number 1, we're all born with self-love. As we grow up, we are taught things that have an impact on how we feel about ourselves. Number 2, if we don't add our own self-love, then we will always be at a deficit. Number 3, when you are looking for self-love, it's a process and a journey, and it's different for different people. Number 4, awareness that you lack self-love or confidence is the first step to getting more self-love. Number 5, it's a dangerous game to place your self-love and self-esteem outside of yourself. Number 6, your inner critic is your worst enemy that's made up of everything negative you've learned in your life. Number 7, the level of perfectionism we search for is unachievable. It's still acceptable to love yourself even if you're not perfect. And number 8, if your social media is causing you to be at war with yourself, it's not worth the time you spend there. It's time to reach for the mute and unfollow buttons, regardless of who it is. All right, that's all we have for today. I just want to give you one more reminder to make sure that you pre-order my book so that you can get in on all those amazing masterclasses. You can find the link for it in the show notes. You can also find the link at infjwoman.com. Also, make sure that you subscribe wherever you listen so that you don't miss an episode. And head over to YouTube at youtube.com/thequietonespodcast so you can watch the videos. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you again next week.